The Miami Dolphins need to seriously consider selling ahead of the 2024 trade deadline. But what do the economics of some of those options look like? We're exploring that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami, and the NFL draft lead for the 33rd team. I want to thank all of our everydayers who do tune in on a daily basis because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL in all lowercase to win $50 instantly when you play $5. We're back home from South Florida. We've been doing a little contract work, right? The focus is not quite so much on pathways to postseason and pathways to victory on Sundays anymore. Those days, this season, c'est la vie. We'll see you later. No, and then the players are going to say all the right things about you get punched in the mouth. Jordan Poyer, you get punched in the mouth. The only way to you just got to get back up on the horse and do the thing. And Alec Ingold, there's tangible progress and growth. And the only way to go through it is to go through it. That's great, guys. You say the right things, keep working your butts off. And I hope you make me eat my words here. But the season, not the result that anybody expected. And the most difficult part of that is the last 2 weeks, you blew double-digit leads. And if you'd won both of them, you'd beat a playoff spot right now. It's very easy to say, well, if we're that close to a postseason berth, let's put the run together and let's go. And 1-7 to 9-8, we did it a couple of years ago. Yeah, you did. Go ahead, do it again. I'll believe it when I see it. Because everything that I have observed and heard and seen and discussed with those who are closer to the organization than I am is this is a team that has a lot of internal problems. And I think the struggles of this football team on Sundays are an embodiment of bigger conflicts of the direction of the team that you don't see on Sundays. I don't think that's going away. I don't think, and maybe you get a Herculean effort and the switch flips. Hope it does. It'd be a lot of fun. But I'm not counting on it. And as a result, we're looking at players and contracts and the trade deadline, which is a week from tomorrow. And options for the Dolphins within that construct of a trade deadline and older players or players with big contracts that maybe you can collect some level of draft capital for. This was really spurred on by the comments of Mike McDaniel on Monday when he was asked about if Bradley Chubb's practice window would open. And the Dolphins, if they were to make a run and win some football games, including one that would have been really helpful would have been the one on Sunday against Arizona when you could not pass rush Kyler Murray with your front to save your life. You had to blitz him, and he killed against the blitz because he put his Superman cape on. Bradley Chubb does not sound as though his practice window is going to open this week. Mike McDaniel described it as an ACL plus, so there was more to that injury than just the ACL recovery. And the Dolphins have an interesting decision to make with Bradley Chubb in that case. Because Bradley Chubb is a player who the team acquired at the trade deadline in 2022. He's a great player for you when he was healthy last year and played through injuries after the trade deadline in 2021. And obviously you acquired him and gave him a new player contract. And it's part of the aggressive mentality within the rebuild that has kind of accelerated the Dolphins to this critical mass that we perceive the team and the current build of it to be at right now. Bradley Chubb, he'll be in his age 29 season in 2025. From a salary cap perspective, He's got the last of his guaranteed salary, and it's guaranteed for injury in 2025. So the option or the options that you have as a team, now that you're 2-5 and going into Orchard Park for your last game before the trade deadline, is do you just bring Bradley Chubb back this offseason and you're going to roll with him in 2025 into the future, where you're going to have a $29 million salary cap hit at your disposal in his age 29 season coming off of an injury. And you bring him back when he's ready to go and he just plays the end of the year, and you risk the $10 million injury guarantee that complicates what your exit ramp looks like if you want to get away from that contract. You have a first-round pick plus invested in Bradley Chubb. You get a first-round pick invested in Jalen Phillips. Jalen's unfortunately enduring his second consecutive season-ending injury. You have another first-round pick in Chop Robinson. I would imagine there's going to be more investments on the edge coming this offseason. So is Bradley Chubb a part of the solution? If he's not a part of your long-term plans, then you can consider, do you play him? Can he pass a physical in the next 8 days? Or could he have passed a physical if you had him in your long-term plans and you didn't have the question of the injury guarantee? Like, there's a world in which Bradley Chubb could pass a physical and could be traded by the trade deadline for a team that was interested if they were interested. What would the asking price be there? Probably pretty modest for a player who hasn't played this season and a player that has several years left on his contract of significant money, although the guarantees are really only up with the injury guarantee for 2025. It's a modest risk for a team. You could probably get a mid-round pick for Bradley Chubb. But that's a decision this team has to make. If he's not in your long-term plans, but he's not ready to go before the trade deadline, do you bring him back? Do you say, well, it was an ACL plus, he's going to take the entirety of the season, and he's going to get healthy for 2025, and you can designate him as a post-June 1st cut and split the money that way? As far as the salary cap savings, there's a lot of different ways that it can go. So you're thinking about the big contracts, and I know Adam Beasley for Pro Football Network put together a piece about like the big names on the Dolphins roster and what, if you can give them the opportunity to go compete somewhere else this season, if it's for the benefit of the team, because the way that this season has unfolded for Miami, what does that look like? So I came up with 4 names: Bradley Chubb, Terron Armstead, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Ramsey. Of course, this is complicated by the fact that 2 out of these 4 names got contract adjustments 2 months ago. It's not great. But things happen fast in the NFL, and that's where the Dolphins find themselves now. I'm not saying I would have a price for all of these names personally, and that's what we're going to get into next as far as like realistic asking prices, what I would deem to be acceptable with where the team is at and what the long-term outlook of the team looks like, and the cost-benefit analysis from a salary cap perspective. Like there's different dynamics for each one of these well-established veteran players that could potentially fetch you some kind of an asset on the trade deadline if you're going to find yourself undertaking a youth movement because this season has gone completely off the rails. We're going to look at realistic asking prices for those names next here on this episode of Locked on Dolphins, so make sure that you stick with us. You can get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page as where you place your bet. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Right now, this Dolphins-Bills game for Week 9 is about what you would expect for the history of these two teams. The Bills are favored by 6.5 points at home. Miami going into Orchard Park, they've played a couple of close games against Buffalo, but none recently in Orchard Park. it's kind of been a house of horrors. He haven't won in there since 2016. So it's been a minute since the Dolphins have won, and rightfully so. The Bills, with their successes this season, favored by nearly a full touchdown over on FanDuel. But if you like those odds, you can play them over at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So I have all my contract work over here on my other screen. And the economics of these players is where there's this odd intersection, and it makes threading the needle for actually getting something productive done in the trade deadline with these kinds of players. Like we talked about Javon Holland and potentially Kader Kohou if you wanted to give Cam Smith some more run. Javon now dealing with a knee injury after a hand injury and in a contract year, playing a non-valuable position in a safety, like from a traditional norms of positional value perspective, that's probably going to be a tough sell, to be honest. Bradley Chubb is almost entirely dependent upon if he can pass a physical. I don't know that that's the case. Maybe they're slow playing it because they felt this coming as a potential opportunity. Maybe he's authentically still a ways away from his recovery. But then you have Tyreek Hill, Terron Armstead, and Jalen Ramsey. If I were to move Bradley Chubb, and I'm kind of mentally prepared to not have Bradley Chubb for 2025, regardless. If you told me you could get a fourth, maybe even just a fifth round pick for Bradley Chubb at this stage, provided he can clear a physical, and that can be an additional piece of your edge rush room where it's kind of clears up the investments. You got all these backlogged investments of guys that aren't helping you with Jalen and Bradley Chubb, unfortunately, and Chop Robinson's having to learn on the job, and it's a difficult spot for him to be in. Any team that acquires Bradley Chubb, at least for this season, would be acquiring about half of his $6 million base salary. So you need about $3 million in cap space, and that's a round number. I'm rounding that number, but that makes it a pretty attractive acquire, assuming he's healthy and able to get a pass physical. But I would expect, because of the injury history, because there's extra dollars attached to it for a pass rusher who's coming off of an injury and 29 years old next season, where he's under contract and then they have to deal with the rest of what that contract looks like, it makes it more messy. It hurts the value of a potential acquisition, assuming he's even healthy to be acquired. Now, Terron Armstead, who reworked his contract ahead of this season, took a pay cut, really. Terron's an outstanding talent. He'll be 34 next season. The durability issues have always been present there. The team invested an early draft choice in Patrick Paul, who got a start against Tennessee. And if this season becomes a youth movement and player development type of year down the stretch, regardless of who's still here off of this system, this scheme, this coaching staff, this brain trust, regardless of all of that, if the end of the season becomes about young guys playing, Patrick Paul's a really important one to get some reps for, because you got to figure out where he's at with your level of confidence, because you're on the books for about a $22 million salary cap for Terron Armstead if he's back. Now, maybe you keep him and he retires. If he doesn't, then you're probably looking at a post-June 1st departure for him to kind of split some of the cap space and kind of open it up for you. But if that opportunity arises now, think about Minnesota, right? Just had Christian Darrisaw go down. And because Terron reworked his contract, he's got a $1.2 million base salary, which means any team that's acquiring Terron Armstead takes on whatever percentage of how many games are left out of $1.2 million is the checks that they have to write him for the remainder of the season. It's an attractive dollar amount at a premium position for a player who's playing pretty good ball right now in Terron Armstead, but there's still the injury risk. And there's additional years of big money commitments financially behind it. That is probably a turnoff for other teams. And we'll get into the salary cap ramifications for Miami with all of these guys at the end of the show. But Miami, from their perspective, Offensive tackle, 33 years old, Pro Bowl caliber player. Because the shelf life is short, it's probably in the same strike zone as Bradley Chubb as far as a realistic price on what you could get offered to you, a 4 or 5. Now, if you're 2-7 or 2-6, and you get offered a 4 for Terron Armstead, and the problem from Minnesota specifically, but they're just the team that has the tackle injury right now. They don't have a lot of picks. So that creates a whole other conversation about what assets do they have to offer you versus what the value is that you feel is fair value. But if you told me you could get a early day 3 pick for Terron Armstead, and you already have made the investment into the replacement in the future of the position with him and Patrick Paul, and this is kind of it, and he flirted with retirement, this season is what it is, you'd probably be wise to take the asset that you can get. You got Jalen Ramsey and Tyreek Hill. This is where it gets interesting because both these guys had contracts done recently that involve bigger financial commitments long term. And I think that hurts the value of at least one of these players, but not both of these players. Because Jalen Ramsey, if you remember, was acquired via a 3rd-round pick and Hunter Long. That's the cost to acquire Jalen Ramsey, who's now another year and a half older, still playing at a high level, still playing at a very high level. But he's the one who has the big new commitment to him from the contract. It was a 3-year, $72.3 million contract with the Dolphins with $24 million guaranteed, an annual average salary of $24.1 million. You got a restructure bonus of $24.89 million. So he got a huge influx in cash, and the way that the Dolphins set up his cash flow for the years after that, remember he had 2 years left on his deal plus the 3 new years. This is a 5-year contract now. And there's an option bonus for $18.9 million for 2025 that's due in week 1 that's automatically going to be prorated out across the next 5 seasons. He's got another option bonus for 2026, another option bonus for 2027. Now, the 2025 compensation is all that's guaranteed out of that, but that's still $24.235 million for a player who was already going for a late day 2 asset and a player at the cornerback position. And I think he will age extremely gracefully, but he just turned 30 this past week. That sets off some alarm bells for teams, that age cliff that exists. And I think Ramsey, again, will transcend that. But the length of a contract like that, plus the fact that the Dolphins would eat salary cap in 2025 if they moved him, is what makes both that and the Tyreek Hill contract difficult. The Dolphins would lose, and I don't want to do this whole part before we get into the cap ramifications. They'd lose over $8.5 million in cap space by trading Jalen Ramsey by the trade deadline. So now you got to come in to incentivize and sweeten the pot and make it worth it for the team to move on from the player, knowing full well you're going to lose another contract's worth of salary cap space next year. You need a good asset back. And the asset that you gave to get Jalen Ramsey 2 seasons ago in the first place, or a year and a half ago in the first place, was already kind of modest. I'd be surprised if you got in that strike zone. Now, if somebody gave you something or offered you something in that strike zone, maybe you do take it. But Ramsey's one of those guys, like he's internally got it as far as like he gets how to be a consummate professional and he does his own thing, but his process is really good, and he's mastered technique and mastered his body and how to do it. And the intensity never waned without Tua Tagovailoa over the course of the past month of the season. And stuff like that stands out to me like that. This is a player that I would want to be here. I authentically would. If he wants to be here, I would love to have Jalen Ramsey and have him age through this contract, which I think can still be a good one, even though the dollars are good, just because he's going to move around and it's going to put him still in more positions to be close to the football and have some more opportunities to make some more plays in different kinds of ways than just being a shutdown corner. Then there's Tyreek. We're going to talk about the cap ramifications for all of these and the ultimate domino effect on what the asking price would be and how realistic it could be for something to materialize. That's next here on Locked on Dolphins, so make sure that you stick with us. Time is your most precious commodity, so don't waste it doom scrolling on Twitter after the latest Dolphins loss. You can spend it wisely to improve yourself. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Introduction to Free Market Economics. Conveniently enough, for an economics type show here on Locked on Dolphins. The rise and fall of the Roman Republic, and much, much more. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost. It is easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Perhaps you're looking to stay in the game this week. PrizePicks has you covered, the best place for real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You pick more or less than at least 2-player projections for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long with PrizePicks. PrizePicks also has an insurance policy for injuries. If your player leaves in the first half and does not return, PrizePicks keeps your lineup live. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks now offers Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to get the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions to help you get bigger payouts. So download the PrizePicks app. Use code LOCKEDONNFL. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is, download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. So the Tyreek element here. There's been will they, won't they, whole bunch of drama around Tyreek and posting about the Chiefs, this, that, the other thing. Tyreek's probably the player that you could get the biggest return for in a hypothetical trade. Why? Because wide receivers are readily traded. We've seen that. We've seen DeAndre Hopkins get traded. We've seen Amari Cooper get traded. Just this trade deadline. Already, there's been movement on the wide receiver market. And Tyreek is a part of this Dolphins nucleus of players and skill players that Mike McDaniel kind of said out loud on Monday when talking about the young running back Jalen Wright, that if you told him he had 2 carries in the game, you'd be surprised to find out why. But Mike needs to make the adjustments and make sure that we're based on the game flow, yada, 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 yada. I'm not a fan of the explanation. But you have so many options to provide the football to. And Tyreek Hill is a player who, got his contract reworked and got some more guaranteed money as a part of that and got a cash raise for this upcoming season or for this season we're in right now. The Dolphins have the opportunity to see if there's an interest in a market for Tyreek Hill if they feel that is in the best interest of the passing game. And you're getting worse when you don't have Tyreek Hill. There's no question there. But between the growth in the running game, between the emergence of Jonnu Smith, between the fact that you're underinvesting and underutilizing Jalen Waddle and what he's capable of as a player who's just now entering into his physical prime, that's at least a conversation to be had if you get the right offer. And that's, of course, the fine print is you have to get the right offer. The element for Tyreek is the same as what it was with both Terron Armstead and Jalen Ramsey, who had their contracts adjusted in some way, shape, or form. There's a minimum salary that is a piece of that puzzle. Any team that acquires Tyreek Hill is only acquiring about half of what the base salary is. that, according to SpotTrack, has the Dolphins, you'd say about $600,000 by that another team absorbing that. And then the way that his salary is structured for his guarantees in 2025 is you would then see the team that acquires Tyreek Hill, they'd have to pay. It's about a $15 million option bonus that's due at some point next season, plus about $10 million in cash. So it's $25 million in cash that's guaranteed. You know that up front when you're acquiring the player. That knocks down the value of acquiring the player because there's guaranteed cash attached to the player. This is an elite football player, Tyreek Hill, right? And it's a position that teams readily move for. And you think about some of the teams that have been knocking on the door on Brandon Ayuk, and nothing got done. I think those two teams, that situation in particular, has a couple of teams that has made some noise early this season. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who you've done business with Minkah Fitzpatrick already. The Washington Commanders with Jaden Daniels at quarterback, and they're 6-2, and they were looking for Brandon Ayuk. Now they had a pre-existing relationship. But if either of those teams came knocking, offering a 1, you take it? With this season being what it is, knowing full well there's going to be opportunities to readjust and reacclimate the salary cap, and having some more assets to kind of kickstart a new cycle, because these things are cyclical. And I think it is important to note that even if the Dolphins chose at the end of the year to move on from Mike McDaniel and chose at the end of the year to move on from Chris Greer, there is a nucleus of talent that does exist here that is still younger talent. Even if they have bigger contracts and were rewarded with bigger contracts, whether that's happened or not, the floor of the franchise is in a much higher place than what it was in 2019 when they did this the first time. And that's part of what makes it so frustrating that we're in the shoes that we're in. Talent's really not the issue. There's a leadership vacuum with this football team. There's a discipline issue with this football team. They don't play particularly focused. They don't play complementary. They are not playing anywhere near their potential. And I get you didn't have Javon Holland for most of the game against Arizona, and you didn't have Zach Sealer, and you didn't have Bradley Chubb, and you didn't have Jalen. It's not an excuse. You should have won that football game. Your defense played like garbage. 4 out of their 5 possessions in the second half went 70-plus yards, and they got touchdowns on, 3 of them? And a game-winning field goal on a 4th, and they got a safety? Come on now. Awful second half performance from the defense. And your offense had a couple opportunities for knockout blows and mismanaged some situational football type stuff. It's a whole other conversation. We got into a little bit yesterday. But for a salary cap perspective, for both Tyreek and Jalen Ramsey, you're losing significant amounts of money against the cap next year. Now it clears up. I mean, Tyreek, from a 2026 perspective, you're talking about saving $50-something million in 2026 if you move him this season, because you would then assume the rest of the dead cap from money that's already been paid out but is prorated into future years. That all accelerates into the next calendar year, because this technically qualifies as like a this year post June 1st trade. If you're not familiar with those dynamics, if you trade a player post June 1st, whatever salary cap commitments you have in that calendar year for the player stay in that calendar year, and all future years worth of previously paid money that you still have to account for against the salary cap in future years all gets rolled into the next following year. So you're losing salary cap space for both Hill and Ramsey. Now that means you'd ideally have to get a higher offered asset to incentivize you to take the trade. You can't just fire sale, give them away for pennies on the dollar. That's irresponsible, and it's going to be an even bigger black eye for you than what this season already is. But Bradley Chubb, there's a medical question there that's a blockade. You could save $3 million in salary cap space this year if you offloaded him, and then it would equal to about $2 million versus what he's currently scheduled for in the cap in 2025. And then 26 and 27, you'd save $29 million in each of those 2 seasons. But he has to be able to pass physical. We don't know that's the case. Terron Armstead, if you move from Terron Armstead, you'd save about $600,000 this year. Next year, you'd save about $3.1 million. And then in 2026, you'd save about $22 million against the salary cap. That's interesting. He's healthy. He plays a premium position. Can you get a early day 3 offered pick to make that happen? I don't know that that's going to be the case. Good news is there's always need for offensive linemen. We forget we have Kendall Lamb and his farewell tour as well, with Patrick Paul as the guy who you're going to want to figure out at some stage what he brings to the table. But Ramsey, you're losing significant amounts of salary cap space. He was already a diminished player as far as like a trade value for package when you acquired him. The added years is not going to help that. So that probably hurts your cause. But Tyreek is still a marquee player, obviously in the prime of his career from a production standpoint before this season got off the rails. Voted the number 1 player in the NFL by his peers. There's been some murmurs and waves and whispers, and is it authentic? Does he have an interest in playing somewhere else? I know he said he wants to end his career here. I don't know. If you told me you could get a 1 for Tyreek, I'd probably be willing to bite the bullet for the salary cap commitments in 2025, knowing full well you're saving $55 million in 2026 salary cap space. And in addition to that, you'd be getting a premium asset back for a player at wide receiver who would be going into his age 31 season in 2025. Dolphins kind of opened up Pandora's box with these recommitments on some of these contracts. And because this season has not gone the way that anybody expected that it would, they have some sticky situations on their hands for sure. And it's a part of a bigger conversation about the direction of the franchise and the people who are running the franchise and the culture of the franchise. And that's all the stuff that we're weeding through. But deadlines spur action, and you got a deadline for trades in 8 days. And if I were the Dolphins, if I were in the shoes of somebody responsible for managing the football team and trying to do the right things to put the team in the best position to be competitive, I would have honest conversations about what this year's faults are and the perfect embodiment of Tua Tagovailoa's return. He was not the savior. You scored 27 points. You had nearly 400 yards of offense. Your defense fell apart at the seams. You couldn't organically pass rush against Kyler Murray because you didn't have Bradley Chubb and you didn't have Jalen Phillips. And you couldn't get it done. And the defense fell apart. So have an honest conversation. Because I think the honest conversation right now is like those people that worried that 2023 was going to be like the peak of this cycle of the team. That's probably where we're at. And then you can be in denial of that with the new information that you have, or you can be honest about it and accept you're going to have to at least do some recalibration to get ready for the next build within this brain trust, or get ready to recalibrate with a whole new brain trust when you get to the end of the year. I don't want to do more than one show at the same time. So that's going to do it for us here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys for checking out the show. We don't just say it. We live it here on the Locked On Network. It is your team every day. Even in the midst of a disastrous season for the Dolphins, we are here to go through this process together. I hope our therapy today, talking trade deadline, was helpful for all of you. I hope to see you all again tomorrow.